Hey, what's up, roadside history followers? I'm on the road today, out checking out another historical place along our roadsides. Today I'm going to take you to the small town of Circleville, Utah, actually just outside of town. I'm going to take you to the boyhood home of one of America's most notorious train and bank robbers, one of the most notorious outlaws in the history of this country, a man by the name of Robert Leroy Parker, also known as Butch Cassidy. I'm going to take you to his home, tell you a little bit about his life, and some of the mysteries surrounding his death. So I hope you'll stay with me and tune in on Roadside History today and learn a little bit more about this historical figure and this historical place. And by the way, if you haven't already liked and subscribed to my channel, please do so. I've learned that about 90% of the viewers of my channel haven't subscribed. So if you would, go ahead and hit subscribe on the bottom, follow our channel, and get new stories and new updates every week. Hey, welcome back to Roadside History. I'm here at the boyhood home of Butch Cassidy. His real given name is Robert Leroy Parker and became one of the famous outlaws in American history. This little homestead is located just outside of Circleville, Utah, which is a small town just off the beaten path, about an hour off I-15 to the east of Beaver, Utah. It's ironic because Beaver, Utah is where Robert Leroy Parker was born. In fact, give you a little background history, Parker's family immigrated here to the United States. His parents would marry in, I believe it was 1865, if I'm not mistaken, and they would live in Beaver, Utah, where Robert was born. But a land dispute would have his father leave Beaver and settle just over the mountain, probably 80 miles as the crow flies, over here to this little area in Circleville, Utah. And behind me is the home of Robert Leroy Parker. Parker lived here on this property, in this home, from the time he was 14 till about the time that he was 18 years old. And he was just like any other boy. He loved to have fun. He loved horses. He liked to read. His family history records that he was pretty fun-loving with his brothers and sisters, which he had a number of brothers and sisters. I think the exact number was 8, if I'm not mistaken, but I'll double check that for you. Anyway, Parker would live here for a while, but he'd soon grow tired of the life out here. He loved cattle and he loved animals, and so he went to work for some cattle ranchers. And while he was doing that, he met a man by the name of Mike Cassidy. Mike Cassidy would have a huge influence on his life because Mike Cassidy was a criminal. He was a horse thief, and he started showing Parker, Robert Leroy Parker, some of his ways, and he became very impressionable. In fact, history recounts that he would take on this man's last name, kind of to disguise his real name, but also to protect his family, but also because he had an admiration for him. Well, this man would show Parker how to be a criminal, and Parker would take on that name, Cassidy. Now, where does the Butch come from? Well, for a short time, Parker lived in Wyoming, in Lander, Wyoming. He worked as a butcher, and while working there, he took the name Butch. Hence, you get the name Butch Cassidy. Let me show you the home and then tell you a little bit more about his life. You can actually go inside the home, which is what I'm going to take you in to do. They've got plexiglass lined up here to protect it, but give you an idea of what it was like here in those days. This is a one-room cabin. You can see they've got the little fake picture of Butch there. But this property had been restored. In fact, several individuals that live in the area saw the importance of restoring this property, and so they did that. And today, it stands as a place that you can come visit and come see. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about Parker. I keep calling him Parker. I'm going to start calling him Butch Cassidy, just so you have a better understanding and appreciation for who he is. Well, this individual got into train robbing, got into bank robbing. In fact, the first bank that he robbed was the San Miguel Bank, which is located in Telluride, Colorado. He and a few others made off with about $21,000, which by today's standard would probably be about $800,000. So it was quite a sum of money for the time. And with that money, Parker would use it to buy some property. He'd go back up to Wyoming And while in Wyoming, he would purchase a ranch and would trade and purchase cattle and trade for beef. And there he met a young lady. I believe her name was Ann Bissett, who he fell in love with. And as history recounts, then the sister, then back to her, and yada, 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 yada. Well, Cassidy just couldn't stay away from crime. He was arrested and he was sentenced to 2 years in prison because of horse theft. Anyway, he served about 3/4 of that sentence before he was released. And after his release, he would begin assembling his gang of bank robbers and train robbers that would become known as the Wild Bunch. In fact, probably the most, I don't know, the person that we remember most in history of his Wild Bunch was an individual by the name of Harry Longabaugh, also known as the Sundance Kid. That's why you generally will hear, when you hear the name Butch Cassidy, you'll hear the Sundance Kid, because the Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy would spend, well, the rest of their lives committing crimes together. And ultimately, up until their death. There's a tack shed behind me that you can see. Let me show you a little bit of that. While I'm showing you this, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about Sundance and Butch Cassidy. So as history records, these two individuals would basically work their way from New Mexico up to Wyoming. Eventually they even find themselves in Europe. But they robbed banks, they robbed trains. In fact, if you're ever in Montpelier, Idaho, which is about 8 hours to the north of where I'm standing today, Montpelier, Idaho actually does a great big Butch Cassidy days, and they have a Butch Cassidy museum there because he robbed a bank in Montpelier, Idaho, and it's kind of become famous to their town. He got away with, I want to say it was about $8,000, $7,000 or $8,000, which tended to be typical. In fact, not far from where we are today, about 3 hours to the east, to the northeast, he would rob the payroll of a company, a mining company. Anyway, he would work his way through in and out of the area. His Wild Bunch, oftentimes after they robbed a place, they would hide out at Robber's Roost, which became kind of their network of hiding places throughout the Southwest. And eventually, as the Pinkerton detectives and law enforcement tend to close in on him, I think Butch knew his days were numbered. One of the things that he did was, like I mentioned earlier, he traveled to Europe for a time, hoping the heat would cool off. He came back, you know, and some would even say he had surgery on his face to change his appearance. I don't know how true that is, but that's a piece of oral history that's been passed down. Anyway, eventually, as the story goes, Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and the Sundance Kid's girlfriend are going to find themselves in South America. Let me tell you a little bit about that. In 1901, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Etta Place, who was the girlfriend of the Sundance Kid, they would leave New York and head to South America, to Buenos Aires, in fact. Of course, they had a tremendous amount of money with them because, well, they had stolen it all along the way. And while they were down in South America and Argentina, they purchased a ranch where they would live for the next 4 or 5 years or so. And it was a huge ranch, 15,000 acres is my understanding. And they lived in this area for a while. But the thing about criminals that never changes is criminals never change. As they continued to follow their life of crime and rob individuals and rob banks, it would eventually continue to catch up. They would leave Buenos Aires. Etta would go back to San Francisco. She was done with her life of crime. And eventually, what you see is the Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy will return to South America. They'll just keep going further south. They'll end up in Bolivia. And while they're in Bolivia is where the story takes an interesting twist. You see, they managed to have jobs. Even when they were in Argentina and in Bolivia, they held jobs. And they tried to live a life without crime, but they just couldn't stay away from it. Well, as the story goes, Cassidy and Sundance Kid are discovered and they're killed in a shootout with the Bolivian authorities. I believe that was 1908, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, they're killed in this shootout, and the rest is history, or so people think. That's the great thing about a good story and history is, over the years, as Butch Cassidy was pronounced dead, this American outlaw hero, if you will, was pronounced dead, his family would tell a different story. You see, Cassidy's family would maintain that Cassidy would return home multiple times after he was apparently dead. Sisters saw him, brothers saw him. Individuals say that no, he lived out his life. He moved back to the United States, and some even say that he actually died in the Pacific Northwest in the 1930s. I don't know. It's hard to say what's true, but it's also hard to argue against family members who say that they saw him long after he was reported dead, and they visited with him long after he was reported dead. So no matter what your take is on the history, there's definitely intrigue and mystery surrounding his death. I don't know. I guess one of the things I would encourage you to do is learn a little bit more about Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Their bank robberies were numerous. I guess one of the good things about Butch is Butch wasn't a killer. He wasn't Jesse James. He wasn't stealing and killing and making examples out of people. He was taking money and doing what he was with it, but he wasn't killing people, which, you know, I guess if there's a lesser crime, then there it is. But anyway, if you ever find yourself in this part of Utah, I'd encourage you to take a stop. Swing by Circleville, Utah. You can see there's the Butch Cassidy home again right there. Swing by and take a look at this home and learn a little bit more about the history. There's numerous historical markers along the way. It's actually really easy to get here. If you're taking I-15 north from Las Vegas or from St. George, you'll get past the town of Parowan, and you'll keep heading out. And eventually you're going to come to an exit. I can't remember the name of the exit, but the exit will point you towards Panguitch, Utah. Take that exit, and then it's about a 45-minute drive over, and down Highway 89, you're going to come across the Butch Cassidy home just a few miles outside of town here in Circleville, Utah. So I'd encourage you to come and see it. I hope you enjoyed today's history stop on Roadside History and learning a little bit more about one of America's greatest outlaws, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I hope you'll take a moment to like and subscribe to my channel. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers, so we'd love for you to subscribe. We'd love for you to enjoy your next road trip, and be safe.